Hey, everybody, welcome to Imperfect Heroes podcast. And I have such an amazing guest. I always get amazing guests. I'm so lucky that way. But I have another one for you today, and her name is Veronica Williams. And Veronica, you come from a faith-based point of view, right? And I know we are talking about, I think it is probably next to life, the greatest gift you can give your kids, and that is a stable, loving home and a relationship that's working for them to watch, right? And that's kind of her bag. That's her deal. And so, Veronica, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you have going on?
Oh, okay. Hi, I am Veronica Williams. I'm a licensed minister as well as a master certified life coach. Um, I am the co-founder, which is of a veteran-owned business with my husband, Alliance Seminars Coaching, where we provide coaching for premarital um, couples that are engaged as well as those that have hiccups. And as we facilitate workshops for organizations that are willing to build or that are wanting to build um, their employee-based relationships.
I love it. I love it. I kind of have a similar thing in that I help with employers who want to help their employees who are struggling with kiddo issues.
Mm.
Yeah. So we have that kind of in common. But Veronica, I really do feel with all my heart that the relationship at home has such a strong and long-lasting, impactful effect on the children growing up in that home. So when there's love and compassion and kindness between the couple that's raising these amazing people, um, that affects their outlook on who they are. It affects their outlook on the world, on how other people and the relationships that they develop, their own self-esteem. It just goes on and on. And so I know that you start out with some of the premarital stuff. What a great place to start, right? Is before we even get going. Yeah, yeah. So talk about some of the things that you would suggest for a couple to look at as they're just even planning on creating a family and a home.
Yes, DJ, I will first like to say that, um, parents are the first influencers to
Hmm.
shape a child's life.
That's right.
And in addition to, during the couples, I do parenting as well, is why we are here to discuss that. So that works right in line. But one way parents can do is to make sure that they are unified, that they
Yeah.
are on one accord, that you all have already worked out your own personal and collective issues prior to having
Hmm.
children. Number one, be ready for children.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we're not really ready for children, we have we don't really live it before them. And so I would say be ready for children, be ready for what it takes to be a parent.
Hmm.
um, Prior to having children, I would say work on yourselves individually and collectively to be able to even share your own personal, grow in your own personal bond so that when you include your children, you already are connecting. The two of you are connected, and then you're just adding this added addition to your family. That is
Yeah.
some of the beginning start that I would say to start with is be ready to have them and
Yeah.
work on your own issues prior to having them, even during the pregnancy.
Yeah, I would agree. In fact, there are some studies, there are actually several studies out there that even if a mom found herself in a unfortunate situation and decided to give life and help a family through adoption, that even the stress levels, the music they listen to, all of that stuff, while that child is still in vitro, will have an effect on them and their ability to concentrate and to connect and to build relationships as well. And so I always think that those moms who are brave enough to help another family through adoption rather than not choosing life are absolute heroes. And I think that first off, that's one thing we need to do as a society is really hold these women up to a higher, level of gratitude and understanding. But at the same time, too, I think when you look at the way you grew up, right? And everybody, even if you had the most idealistic childhood, there are going to be things that you will want to do the same as your parents, and then there will be things you want to do differently. And I think when you're thinking about those things, and you can do these things, after whatever, but before is the best, is that when you kind of come up with some of these ideas that, okay, we want to have a faith-based home, we want to have music in our home, we want to have sports in our home, or whatever it is, I'm not going to yell at my kids. My family yelled a lot, and so I may decide I don't want that. I don't want to yell at my kids, whatever that is. And then have that, like you said, conversation with your spouse and make sure that you're on the same page for that is absolutely key.
You're exactly right. You have to have a conversation about your background. What
Mm-hmm.
worked, what did not work. What
Mm-hmm.
did you want to add to your relationship from your background, and what you want to take out. But I think we all come with some type of baggage in a relationship. It's just a matter of when we get together with that mate, we start unpacking that baggage by deeply conversing, making sure that you are authentic, that you are your true self. You're not bringing in your representative, and then making sure that you have you remove the unrealistic expectations, making
Mm-hmm.
sure that you are connecting in a way that is wholesome.
Yeah.
So that when you bring the baby in, there's wholesomeness. You mentioned about my, families yelling. Well, I don't want to yell.
Mm,
Well, this prior to children, and sometimes marriages happen even while you have the children. And
right.
those things that you didn't get to work on before is a good time to just start wherever your relationships start with the children. And that
Mm-hmm.
is with communication and realizing what don't work, because we all discipline differently. We all have expectations of what we want it to look like. But if we keep it to
Mm-hmm.
ourselves and don't share it,
Mm-hmm.
we have to identify is what my expectation that I may have in raising my children. Is it
Yeah.
healthy or unhealthy? When we get to, it's not until you are married with someone or living together with someone that you are really challenged about, are held accountable for your actions, are held, not in your personality, who you are. It
Mm-hmm.
all is out there when you live with
Yeah.
someone, because they see the good, the bad, the ugly, and you just think, oh, I'm just this perfect person. Well, we're not, none of us are perfect. But what we want to do is have a healthy relationship and then build a healthy family once the children
Mm-hmm.
come into play.
I think you're just so right on with all of that. It's just so key to make sure that you two are understanding. And now it doesn't mean that you're both going to parent in the same way. No, because like in my family, a lot going here, just a little bit. And my husband is equally introverted to my extroversion. And so where I would want to talk things out and get to the bottom of it and really work it out. And my husband's just really quiet. And so he's more of you'll do the right thing, or he just was more quiet in his approach with the kids. I was more hands-on with the kids, and and he needed, in his quietness, he needed that time to be by himself. We always used to joke around that if Russ, his name's Russ, if he liked you and you came to visit, he'd hang out for about 10 minutes before he'd head upstairs. And if he didn't like you, he went upstairs right away. So that was just, my guy. But so I think a big part of making that relationship work is understanding how the other person relates to kids, just relates to people in general, and allowing them to be who they are, and realizing that, okay, I'm the noisy one. He is not. It can be the other way around. I've seen couples where it's that, and I've seen couples where they're both super outgoing or they're both super quiet. But I think giving them permission to parent who they are. The important thing is making sure that you have those same values, and the same ideas of success, how you want to help your children through things, is, going to be very individual, but making sure that you share values, and that can be faith values. I think those are very important, but it can also be things like, honesty and hard work, and, do they get an allowance or no? Or, those kinds of things. If you're on the same page there, then I think you'll do a lot better. What do you think?
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I believe it's all about our parenting styles. When we know how we operate out of our personalities, and allowing individuals, or allowing the spouse, or even the mom and dad, if they're not married,
Yeah.
To parent in their way. We can't tell people, our spouses, in my case, or even other individuals, how to parent. We can only let them know, like, this is the style that I'm most used to, but I want you to feel comfortable. I think where a lot of couples make the mistake is one person tries to do all of it.
Yes.
And don't allow the other person, whether it's the wife or the husband, to discipline or to communicate with the children in their own personality. And I believe when you can start there and connecting with, allowing the other person to operate with who they are, then that cuts down a whole lot of the other disagreements or conflict that may happen in front of the children. But I always say, if one spouse disciplines in a manner that you may not want to didn't feel like it was worth it or whatever, do not say anything at that moment in front of the children, because now you're setting
so right.
Now you're setting up that the kids already know what kind of person you are, and now it's manipulation all that starts.
Oh,
and
so true.
No way is the perfect way. No way is the perfect way. So you have to let them be who they are. But the main thing is don't discipline the disciplinarian. And I think that's where we have a problem sometimes, and that's where conflict starts. It happens. You talk offline, out of the sight of the children. You don't let them know that there's a disagreement. And then you let that individual go on, as long as it's not hitting the line of abuse.
Right.
You're okay with that. But if it reaches a line that is a little bit more than that, if it really don't matter that the answer or the response could be one way or the other, let it go. It's not worth it. So just allow the individual to discipline in the manner that they discipline, and do not try to be, don't try to discipline the disciplinarian, is the only way I can explain that, because I've seen that happen a lot of times.
Oh, I have too.
And especially with blended families, if you're going to
Oh
blend a
yeah.
family, talk with the individual and give them authority to discipline your children, not as
Mm-hmm.
a stepmom or a stepdad, but as a couple, as a family.
Mm-hmm.
Have those conversations outside of the children and and then you have a conversation with the children when there's blended families and sometimes not blended families. You have to express to the children to respect their elders.
Yeah.
Don't think that because I'm here, you're going to get away with something that I told you not to. And
Mm-hmm.
recognize when children try to play the parents against each other. That is so key and so critical. And then children, as they grow older and become more verbal, they try to discipline you or they call you to carpet on your disciplined ways, right?
Yes. Yes. I don't know though. There were times when my kids would call me on something, and I'd have to stop and think, and it'd be like, "Oh, they're right." You know, darn it. But then that's a time when you have to come back and say, you know what, and think about what this does to a child, even a young child, to come back and say, you know what, I was thinking about what you said, and you're right. Mommy or daddy needs to improve on this, or this. And so so just a little weird story. 40 years ago, I was actually a 911 operator as I was helping to put my husband through college. And when you're in that environment and in, with the police and all of that, language can get a little colorful. And so I picked up on a little bit of that. None of the big ones, but enough that, it was not appropriate. And so, gosh, Shiloh, he's my second child, and he wasn't in kindergarten yet. He might have been about 4 years old. And he was carrying his full plate. I set him up to fail. He was carrying a full plate around the peninsula and to the table. And guess what happened? He spilled. Yeah,
Yeah.
it dropped it. And all his food goes all over the place. And so I let a word fly, and he said, oh no, he let a word fly. Sorry. And he let a word fly. And I said, Shiloh, you cannot say that word. That is not okay. And he looked at me and said, what? But mommy, you say it. Oh, yeah. Well, there's that. So, so then we talked and came up with a plan. And so that, if I caught him saying that, then he would have to have a timeout or whatever. But if he caught me saying that, I had the same consequence and I had to go and sit and have a timeout. Other times I was tempted to just use that so I could have a timeout, I have to admit. But we, we did better, and he called me on something that was appropriate. And so I think having that mindset instead of, don't correct me or whatever. Well, yeah, they're right. I think to one of the, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, and I was going to just go on and say, I think that one of the greatest gifts that a dad can give a child is to love that child's mother. And the same thing for a mom to give the child is to love that child's daddy. And so when you're in the home, you are showing that, there are kisses here and there, or a touch on the back as you walk by, or, a compliment when you walk in the door and you've given your kids, hey, my babies, and made them feel excited and that you've missed them and loved them. And then you're going to say, just a second, I have to go kiss your mom or kiss your dad. And you have that kind of approach, and the kids are going, blah, but they love seeing that you are together and happy. And so what are some of the things then that you suggest in the work that you do to help couples remain, loving and happy with each other?
Well, what you just said, your example is so good. When a child sees mom and dad showing love towards one another, that gives them security.
Yeah.
That is what allows them to feel like, okay, everything's good. Mom and dad are in a good place. But whenever they see that disconnect, now you cause a little anxiety and a little worry in the children. But it is very important to let the children see you show affection towards one another. And I think one of the ways that you are able to show the affection is learning your love language, learning each other's love language, and being able to express that. And then I also not only, and to your point earlier as well, having those honest conversations with each other and with the children. Yes, mommy and daddy mess up, but the one thing that couples can do that really makes a great impact in front of the children is learning to apologize. Learning to apologize and say, I am sorry when we disagree or when something goes down, because that teaches the children to do that. Showing affection is so key and so critical. I don't know how many people I could tell you that I know, and even within my own family, my own immediate family, how they didn't see the affection, so therefore they don't know how to be affectionate, and it impacts how they develop in relationships with the opposite sex. And so that is why it's so important to make sure that you show the affection, that you are open about your feelings and conversation, to be able to let the children know how to do it. They learn from you. And you have to think about what you say, how you say it, and the most critical piece is the timing, so that they will learn how to do that. So often our children don't know how to do it. And that is why our kids are at a rampage in relationships among the peers, because they only, some of them see what mom and dad does, but a lot of it is what they see around them, TV, all of the other tragic type of TV shows or movies and things like that impacts it as well. So you want to make sure that you have that dialogue with the children to let them know what the real deal is or what the real response should be. Especially when they get into preschool and they have their first little kindergarten or preschool tiff with their peer. Teach them how to go back and apologize. Teach them how to go back and say, you know what? What you did to me, this is how I feel. This is how that made me feel. And we have to even do that as spouses, instead of going off on a tangent at the most inappropriate and unopportune time. We have to be able to say, hey, can I have this conversation with you about something that happened earlier in the day? Not trying to start a crazy cycle, but I just want us to talk about it. When you said this, I felt this way. And then being able to go back and say, hey, I responded to you in such a disrespectful way, and I need to apologize because I don't even know where it was coming from. It just happened. That's an example I have to do sometimes. I think I have to do that today. You get held accountable when you start having conversations, and then you realize, like, why was I even acting like that, or why did I misinterpret what they were saying, or it's not until you have a conversation to do that. And we often have to do that as spouses, and we often have to do that as mom and dad with our children, for whatever reason it is. And that is so trying to live harmoniously is a hard thing, but it can be done. When we think if what I'm going to say going to be helpful or harmful to the relationship, and
Mm-hmm.
helpful or harmful in the growing that the children have to have, or
Right.
have to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how we have to do sometimes. We really have to check ourselves before somebody else check us and make sure, like, should I say this? Should I not? Well, if it's not helpful and if it's harmful and that person isn't in the right mood, maybe you need to
Uh-huh.
hold it for a little bit. Always
Right.
think timing, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
We all have a mindset um, to choose, and we have to make sure that we choose the best response for the right time,
Yeah.
and go from there. But then also have a sidebar just to discuss it. A lot of
Yeah.
times, um, one of the things that I like is that couples, sometimes you may need to go to dinner, or you may need to go to a park, go have ice cream, some place to kind of digress
Mm-hmm.
the tone and the the uproar that may be caused or the
Mm-hmm.
emotions behind
Mm-hmm.
everything,
Yep.
to talk about, because we have to learn how to live healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's too many people that have health issues already. And then if our relationship at home is unhealthy, that just topples all of everything. So we want
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that we live in a healthy way, that we communicate in a healthy way, that we
Yeah.
absorb our surroundings and our environment in a healthy way as we live together as a couple and as we parent. The whole
Yeah.
thing is that nothing's going to be perfect and we're not always in the perfect mood, but we should give some inkling, like, not right now. Can we hold off on that?
Yeah.
You know, try to
Yeah.
reach out for signs that say, oh, you know what? Let me just, let me table
Let's
this
hold on
for a
to
minute.
that one. And sometimes that's hard to do when you're like really frustrated or really mad. And especially if you are in a state of mind where, a lot of our young parents right now have grown up in homes where they pretty much get what they want. Parents will, they get all these expensive toys, and there's so many toys that they have to have a special room for the toys because they won't fit in the kids' rooms. And then they just do all these things for the kids. And so when they become adults, then they struggle with, wait a minute, you don't want to do that, but I want it right now. You're telling me no, what? you know, and that becomes a huge issue. And so we want to make sure that we're giving our kids, that opportunity. And when they see parents who maybe dad really wanted this one thing and mom's like, I don't feel comfortable with that. Happens all the time with parenting. But so how are you going to work it out? And and when things don't go your way, how are you going to work that out? And are they watching you maybe make some compromises and all of that? But I also think that one thing that's so important for your marriage relationship and for the kids is for a mom or a dad to say, you know what? I picked such a good daddy, or I picked such a good mommy for you. He or she, they're amazing, and they're a good cook, or they work hard, or they, I love the way they laugh. And so imagine what that does for the marriage relationship when, I'm in doing dishes, let's say, or cleaning or making dinner. Usually it was the other way around. My husband's the best cook, but to hear someone say, you know what, I picked such a good mommy for you. And my heart just kind of, ooh,
Yeah.
and then too, it's letting the kids know, you know,
Yeah.
that, oh, I do have a good mom, don't I? Or I do have a good dad, don't I? And so it really helps the relationships of everybody in the household when just that little short comment. And you can add, they're pretty, they're handsome, they're smart, they're a good cook, they're good at making things, whatever it is. And and to have them be very spontaneous. And so that the kids are able to see that.
You're right. We have to have complimentary words so that our children will learn how to compliment. We also have to have acts of kindness.
Oh, for
Honey,
sure.
if you're cooking dinner, I'm just going to do the dishes here. Let me just start washing them now. Or you're finished dinner, let me just help you, And husbands and wives, don't reject any help. Receive the help,
Yeah.
And most importantly, though, when we say I do, that means that we're going to receive our spouse, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that is how we have to teach our children. Like what you're saying in terms of allowing the kids to see our kind words, our acts of kindness towards one another. That because we're showing them how to develop in a healthy way when we do that. And we must do that. Because then now they'll learn and take it into their years of learning, whether it's in preschool, elementary, high school, as they become adults, as they get into deeper relationships, they'll learn how to do that, and they won't have to go, they won't have to reach really deep and realize like, where was that? But then knowing, I think it just takes the conversation, getting to know the individual, taking your time, getting to know each other, and realizing how what their likes and dislikes, and have them tell you what their likes and dislikes are. I think the killer in a marriage is that when we think our spouses are telepathic, that after many years they should know. You should know.
Right.
Men don't retain all of that. They do it once, they may not retain. Like, that's a good thing. Women, we keep a historical list, and we need to sometimes tear up that historical list and just get in the moment. When we start going too far to thinking, it's that creates a whole nother layer of issues that don't even need to be. And then when you talk about the gift buying, and kids need to know what no means. They need to know not right now. And then we also have to set boundaries. Even with husbands and wives, we may be able to afford some nice fancy things, but really, is it needed now? Is it a need or a want? Is it only going to benefit one person, or is it going to benefit the two of us and the whole family? Those are things that all require conversations when we began to make purchases, when we began to make decisions. And we make sure that we're on one accord. But out of all of that, you may not be on one accord, but let's have a compromise. That means let's agree, and really mean that you're going to agree to whatever that compromise is. Don't renege on it. Because sometimes, I thought you said, well, no, sometimes you might have to get it in writing. I promise not to bring this up again. I promise not to say that you couldn't have that. I did say you had, but don't, bring old history stuff up. Don't, and stick to your answer. Even with our children, let your no be no, let your yes be yes, let your not right now. Kids will hound you for a time, a date, and all of that. And you teach them when they're young, they'll learn like, okay, let me give mom and dad some space, and then I'll come back. We need to teach them. Let me think about it. But my thinking, I'm not going to give an answer right now. In a couple of hours after I've let this process, let me try to respond. Explaining to our children, explaining to our spouses, we don't, And just when you're making decisions, and sometimes we're calling our husbands, or they're calling the wives because they have to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just have to make the decision, good or bad, and just be okay with it. But that's an agreement that you make. Like, if you don't reach me because I'm in a meeting, or because I'm not
Right.
available, and it's really critical to have that answer, just go ahead and make the decision. I mean, we'll work out that,
And I'll
and
stand by you.
we'll work it out and stand by it,
Mm-hmm.
later. We'll deal with it
Mm-hmm.
later. If there's any correction, we'll just figure out how to correct it later, whether it's a financial thing or whatever, but making sure that it is in the realm of whatever your decision process
Mm.
is.
That's so true. That is so true. And I think probably the last thing, we're running out of time, but I think um, the ability for the kids to see, I forgive you, right? So in teaching in kindergarten, gosh, this was 4 years ago, I think, but we had one of those little guys, that just struggled with waiting and struggled with, but I want this now. And there was an incident where we had one of those little tire swings, out on the playground, and he was just struggling with waiting, and he wound up grabbing one of the kids and yanking him, because the tire swing could have 3 kids on it, the way it was put together. And he yanked one of those kids off. And, of course, it's a soft landing and whatever, but still it made him sad and scared him because he wasn't expecting it. And so, we had the long conversation, and he had to have a little bit of time out. For me, was just sitting there asking questions. He couldn't play right now, but let's talk about what happened, or give you some peace and quiet, but you're not alone. Anyway, in the end, he said, I'm ready to go play. I said, okay, what do you think you need to do for that before you go play? He goes, I need to go say I'm sorry. I said, absolutely. Thank you for thinking of that. So he went over to this other little boy that he had pulled off, and he said, Joey, I'm sorry I pulled you off the tire swing. And this little Joey put his hand on the other kid's shoulder, and he said, that's okay. I forgive you. And you could just see how that washed on the other little boy. And I thought, man, this kid has had some good role models in his life.
And kids are adults trainers, because
Yeah.
the thing about children is they forgive very quickly. They
Yeah, they
have a
do.
short they have a short memory. They could be playing, and they might have a little tiff, but they'll be playing again in 5 minutes. It's when the adults get in and add the extra emotions that the children don't have.
Mm-hmm.
That is
Mm-hmm.
a lovely story. That is just really how it should be. And hopefully we can carry that on and teach our children that. But learning how to say forgiveness, even
Mm-hmm.
in marriages, is the best thing. And being able to explain, some people say no is it, and that's it because I said so. We probably grew up like that, many years
Mm-hmm.
ago.
Yep,
But I
yep.
feel, yeah, but I feel it's okay to explain your answer to the children. And the reason why you explain your answer is not really for the right now, but it's in the years to come, that they
Mm-hmm.
just don't take on some of your personality to be so hard and to
Mm-hmm.
be so cutthroat, but they realize, and what you're teaching them when you explain is that you're teaching them how to be empathetic, how to understand you, and then put that in perspective in their mindset. It is
Mm-hmm.
so many teachable moments that we have, and opportunities to show children how to develop healthy relationships from a young age. And then we
Yeah.
can learn from them. If before, as a parent, we jump into a kid's tiff, I call it a little tiff, because it's not meant to be something argumentative and long lasting. Before we
Mm-hmm.
jump in, we need to step back and see how they work it out,
Oh
because they will
man,
work it out.
you're talking gold here. That is so important. And we tend to jump in so quickly. Or if it's a neighbor kid or someone at the park, whatever, stand back, watch, let's see them work it out, see how they negotiate. Maybe they're yelling at each other. Okay. I'm close by in case things get bad, but I'm not involved. I'm watching, but I'm letting them work it out as for as long as I can. And then they're going to start learning those negotiation skills and problem solving skills and compromise and all of those great things that kids need to learn. And so we shouldn't be jumping in quite so fast. So
No.
Veronica, I see we're running out of time, but I want to make sure my listeners and now watchers get to be in contact with you. What do they need to do?
Oh, through Facebook, you can just type in Alliance Seminars Coaching, and you can reach us on the website, as well as at Alliance Seminars, that's one word, .org, O-R-G.
Mm-hmm. I love it. That is fantastic. And so don't hesitate. And like you said, you do premarital counseling, regular marriage counseling. And from my point of view, I think it's worth it that, we get our cars tuned up every now and then. We get a physical every now and then. I think every X amount of years, we ought to go and take a marriage class and just check in, make sure, and getting that health checkup. And so I would highly recommend Veronica for that. And so, yeah, take advantage of her.
And definitely, because all marriages can add to their toolkit.
Oh yeah.
Some of our tools get a little rusted, and we get so comfortable that we forget. And talking to someone else, whether it's a person that has been married that is older, not so much number of years or whatever, but who has a wisdom and has walked the path that the two of you have walked, and they've worked it out. So that is something that you could do as well. It's always good to have, you're not so much a nosy third party, but let it be a couple that the two of you can trust, and that will be able to have your information held in confidence. And because a lot of things don't need the general public to know. A lot of stuff can be right behind. I think we're everything you could find is Google it, right? And everybody got to tell their business with Facebook and all of that.
Oh my gosh, that's the worst thing in the world.
Yes. So I think sometimes when we have situations with our spouses, those are the times that we need to air it out and deal with it behind the scenes, because most often it can be worked out. But when we exploit it before we've talked together, then and when you get a third party or a fourth party in there, it takes it to the gamut that it shouldn't even be. So that's why it's so important to try to talk to either a life coach like myself and my husband, or either, if it's so deeply rooted and there are issues that go beyond the current, to move forward. If it's something from your past and things like that, it's great to talk to marriage counselors. That's what I would recommend, but feel free to reach out to us. We will be glad to assist in whatever way we can.
I love that. I love that. So Veronica, I always ask my guests the same question at the end of our conversations. And so that is, how would you describe a successful parent?
Ooh, a successful parent is one that recognizes that they're not perfect. Recognize that what I do to be the first influencer in my child's life, let me try healthy tools. And let me be authentic, real, and honest with my children as to whatever it is, as you grow in relationship with them. If it's an experience that they're having and you might have had it, share that experience. Because one thing I realize is that children think we are perfect, And we do have to sometimes be transparent with our children to let them know that we were not perfect.
Yeah.
We also have to be honest with our children to establish a mom and dad relationship and not be friends. That's so that your discipline can be looked at seriously.
Yeah.
And then even if you feel like, oh, I'm not really good in that area, a good parent is going to go to another parent that has
Mhm.
had children and experiences that they're experiencing to get the help that they need.
Absolutely. So I'd like to hear what our listeners are thinking and watchers are thinking. And so if you agree or if you have other comments, I'd love to see them in the chat. You can leave them we're with Rumble and YouTube. You can also leave a review and a comment on the podcast, or just go to our Facebook and Instagram pages. And they're both, it's just Imperfect Heroes Podcast. Imperfect Heroes Podcast. Sorry, I almost added the .com there. And just tell us what you think. We'd love to hear. And so thank you for listening in. Veronica, thank you for spending a few minutes with us. And we will talk to you later. Bye, guys.